we had a broadcaster speak one time, a guy named Michael King, who was a broadcaster for the King County Cougars at the time. And so I said, man, this guy does what Harry Carey does. And so I walked up to talk to him. He stops and he goes, you have such an amazing voice. And I didn't know what to say because I thought it was like my voice is Peter Brady or, Screech or something. No one who's 14 or 15 thinks they have a good voice.
This is the city we call our own. These are the stories of the people we call our neighbors. This is the heartbeat of our hometown. Naperville, this is Real Talk.
All right, welcome back to Naperville Real Talk. I'm so excited to share today's guest with you. He is a local area resident. He's a father of three, a husband. He is the campus pastor of Village Bible Church here in Naperville, but you probably know him by his voice, a decades-long career in Chicago radio, and currently the morning host of WBBM Newsradio. I'd like to welcome Cisco Cotto to the show. Cisco, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well. It's fantastic to be with you. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. We're honored to have you. So we've got a lot to cover, and I certainly want to talk about both your career in broadcasting and in ministry. So let me start out. You grew up in the area in Aurora. Is that right?
Yeah. I grew up, I lived part of the time on the east side and part of the time on the west side, but all my growing up years were in Aurora.
Okay. And you attended Aurora Christian High School. And is that where you got your beginnings of broadcasting, or was it even earlier than that?
It was actually, right at Aurora Christian. We had a chapel that would meet every week, and all the students would funnel into the auditorium. And we had a broadcaster speak one time, a guy named Michael King, who was a broadcaster for the King County Cougars at the time. And I was a big Cubs fan, loved Harry Carey. And so I said, man, this guy does what Harry Carey does. And so I walked up to talk to him at the end of the chapel. And he said, I believe this is my freshman year. He stops and he goes, you have such an amazing voice. And I didn't know what to say because I thought it was like my voice is Peter Brady or, Screech or something. No one who's 14 or 15 thinks they have a good voice. And so he took me out to the ballpark and gave me a tour and let me watch him broadcast. Took me to Moody Bible Institute, to their radio station, and let me watch some of the work he does there. And from that point forward, because of that divine appointment, from that point forward, I said, yeah, radio, this is exactly what I want to do.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you about the voice. I think most people who have a career in broadcasting have, something about their voice that lends it to being appropriate for that. So it's amazing that you had that all the way as a high schooler. So did you grow up watching baseball? Was that your sport of choice, or did you have other sports you enjoyed?
Yeah, baseball was really it. I don't mind the White Sox. I'm not one of these people that is the Cub lover, the Sox hater, or anything like that. I just really, really love baseball. And my dad was a huge Cubs fan. And so he would be in the garage listening to the game on the radio all the time. And so I would always catch the game as I was out there hanging out with him. And it really gave me this appreciation for people who are able to paint a word picture so that you can really imagine what's going on. Even if you're not there, you just have this picture in your head. And that's probably one of the most fun things about radio. And it was all listening to baseball that got me going there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the way that a radio broadcaster calls a game, obviously different than a television broadcaster would call a game. And I've grown up, watching TV for most of my childhood, but then in later years started listening to the Cubs on the radio, and I'm just a huge fan of the radio broadcasts. And it just changes everything. Sometimes I'll put the TV on and turn the sound down and then sync up my radio, through the internet or whatever, and just listen. Because for me, Pat Hughes, as the voice of the Cubs, is unmatched.
Yeah, and not only is he good, and he is just so good, but there is this, it just feels more personal. I don't know how to describe it, but whether it's baseball or I listen to football on the radio too if I'm out and about. I love Jeff Joniak, the Bears play-by-play guy, so talented. And Pat Hughes and Jeff Joniak have this ability to just make it feel like they're there. They're in your car. They're in your garage. They're in your living room. You're right there with them, and they have this excitement and this energy, and also this ability. I don't know how to describe it. This sort of calming way about them, where it's like you're just hanging out with a friend of yours, and that's real. That's a gift. That's really tough to develop, and yet both of those guys really have it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you got started as an intern, and help me if I'm correct in my research here, at Moody. Is that while you were in high school?
Yeah, Michael King, the guy from the
Yeah.
Cougars, brought me in and showed me the studios, and then he got an internship for me, which is really, in this day and age, seems a little crazy because high school students can't get internships anymore. A lot of stations aren't even offering them to college students anymore. And so that opportunity to be there one day a week, all throughout the summer after my freshman year, just such valuable experience at seeing how a radio station operates and confirming, I really like this. I think I want to be a part of this field.
So then that obviously inspired you to go off into broadcasting in college. Is that what your major was? Was it broadcast journalism or?
Yeah, I went to Western Illinois University and I double majored in radio, TV, and also political science.
Okay.
Those were two things that sort of fascinated me. And that meant at Western, a school that I loved, I ended up making great friends, and it was a really wonderful place to be. But on the broadcasting side, it was phenomenal to be in a place where right from the beginning, I could get hands-on experience with the equipment, putting stories together, being on the radio, being on TV, and really growing. I hate to say it this way because it seems to diminish true art, people who can paint and sculpt and that kind of stuff. But radio and TV, it's really art. You have to get your reps, you have to get your experience, you have to work through problems, mistakes, and just really get better at it. And so college was that time where, oh, I'm so glad I don't have most of the old tapes from my stuff back in college because it was some really raw, brutal stuff, stuff that I'd be very embarrassed of today. But you need to go through that in order to learn, like you do pretty much in any field.
So you started on air at WIUM and WIUW in Macomb, is that right?
It's a public radio station
Okay.
in Macomb, and they call it Tri-States Public Radio because they broadcast in Western Illinois and in Southeast Iowa and Northeast Missouri. And so you are not only heard right there in Macomb, where Western is, but you're kind of heard throughout the region. And because it's public radio, there I got experience with long form broadcasts. I could put together stories that were 5, 6 minutes long. I mean, just an eternity. Now in news radio, everything has to be short, so it's very, very different. But I'm glad I got that experience of being able to put together what sort of feel like radio documentaries now.
Yeah, so you've fulfilled many roles in broadcasting over the years, and we'll kind of get into that into your career a little bit. But what is that like when you join a staff? Do you know, well, this is going to be my role, or at a station like that, do you sort of wear many hats?
It all evolves. You get started in one position, especially back at Western at WIUM and WIUW. I was at first a student reporter. They'd send me out on multiple assignments. Then I moved through and became the city hall reporter. And so I'd go and cover city council meetings and things going on in government. Once you get in and once you prove to them that you can do it and that you're willing to work hard, then they're willing to give you more responsibility and allow you to try new things. And that variety, I think, is really important, that you get opportunities to try new things. Otherwise, you get stale and you get a little bored with it.
Yeah, so that's where I guess your poli-sci major kind of came in, being able to cover some of the municipal events and things like that. And when you're doing those, just from a practical standpoint, are those remote reporting sessions? Are you recording into like a field recorder, or what is that like?
Yeah, back then it was recording into a field recorder, doing interviews on that field recorder, and then coming back to the radio station and editing all of that together. And that's still at WBBM now how a lot of our reporting is done. But the technology has advanced, the ability to go live has advanced. You had to go to your old, rotary phone in order to go live before. And now we have equipment that makes it sound like you're broadcast quality when you go live from the field. So it's very, very different now. But back then, yeah, you'd take a little recorder out there, a cassette deck, you'd come back and you'd have to record all the cassette stuff back into another device in order to digitally edit it. And it was long. But yeah, I'm really glad that the technology is better today.
Well, it's funny. It almost sounds like you're talking about, ages and ages ago. We really are talking 20, 25 years ago. That's not that long ago, but how the technology has advanced in media and broadcasting has changed everything. I mean, since we're on the topic, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how have you seen radio as a medium shift over the years and particularly news radio with the advent of the internet, instantaneous news, with the advent of the 24-hour news channels. So that's kind of one part. And then part two, how have you seen it change with podcasting, which is obviously something we're doing right now?
Yeah, and all of that is really tied in together. It's in some respects, news radio as a format led the way before your 24-hour news channel that you have on TV, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. News radio as a format came about in the 60s. And I think it was people on cable seeing, oh, hey, there's this appetite for news. People might want it more than just a few times a day when they're watching these TV newscasts. And so they started doing it on TV and really created this new genre of television. The difference is that the real change is the fact that the news never stops. I mean, it is just nonstop. Whenever something is going on, we need to have someone there to talk about it, to tell people what's going on, to be able to gather people to fill in the details. And that's something that even 20 or 30 years ago, you would not have needed. You would simply just, you'd tell the story and report it whenever you happen to do your particular newscast. So that sort of urgency, that sense of being always on has definitely changed. Radio, I think, technologically has been a little slow to shift to digital. I think radio stations thought at first all they would have to do is put their stream online and that was it, and they would be competitive. And now we're seeing with podcasts, with appetites for shorter pieces of audio, that radio is having to shift again so that it can deliver those. People aren't going to sit down and listen to a podcast of an hour-long all-news newscast, but they might sit and listen to a podcast that's 5 or 8 minutes that gives them a thumbnail sketch of all the headlines throughout the day. And so the infrastructure needs to be put in place to do that, equipment-wise and personnel-wise, and I think that's why the shift has been slow. The money isn't necessarily there yet on the digital side. It's still easier to make money broadcasting than it is podcasting. And so I think that's been part of why radio has been slow to transition as well. But they know they have to do it, and so they're starting to invest money in it. That's why you're seeing more and more audio apps. The company I work for is called Odyssey, and they're spending lots of money and putting a lot of resources into that app. And it's because they know, as much as I hate to say this, it pains me to say this, there will come a day when you will not listen to a radio at all, or even radio as we know it. It will all be digital. And so everyone who's in this field needs to get prepared for that. They need to get ready because it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I even think about the ways that I listen to radio. I think there was a point where I was listening to news radio, sports radio in the car pretty regularly, but now I think you're right. I mean, it's mostly through some sort of a stream. I might listen to the show back later if I'm not caring about what's happening right now live, but I want to catch up on the news. Even my morning news podcast is just that, is about 10 minutes of a morning news podcast. Doesn't have to be super duper current. I can get those updates on my phone or Twitter. How have you?
Twitter is a big deal because you can follow who you want to follow, the news people, the sports people, whatever it is that you want to actually pay attention to, and you see this real-time stream of whatever information they want to send to you. And so news radio, it needs to, in some respects, be more like Twitter, but the challenge is how do we make it on demand? Where we let you, the consumer, decide what you want to click on, what you want to pay more attention to. That it's really hard to do in a radio format. Yeah.
And you talked about the urgency. So with the increased urgency, obviously, I think this is probably something that's a big difficulty of the news industry right now, and that's accuracy. Have you seen that be a challenge for you in broadcasting, where you're getting information so fresh and then trying to verify it as much as possible? What are sort of the filters it goes through before it actually gets to your voice out through the microphone?
Yeah, at WBBM, we have layers of editors and writers and associate producers. And there's really a team of people in addition to the reporters and the anchors that are having this information filtered through them. We also have bosses that are paying attention to this sort of stuff. The main reason that we're able to do it, a lot of other people can too, but I know our station from the inside, the main reason that we're able to do it is because we have bosses who are just militant about being unbiased, making sure that you have both sides or even more if there's more than two sides to a story, making sure that you have it right. We don't want to issue any corrections. We want to get it on quickly. Absolutely. We want that sort of urgency. But the most important thing for our reputation, so that we're known as a station with integrity, with good reporting, is that we get it right. And so if it means it takes another 15 or 20 minutes for us to get it on, we would much rather take that 15 or 20 minutes or even more if it means getting it right, as opposed to having to go and apologize later. But there's big pressure, especially because of something like Twitter. Everyone wants it right now. They want it immediately. They want the latest information. And so I can understand the temptation to just hurry up and get it on. But once you mess that up, and you do it a couple of times, 3, 4 times, then people say you're not reliable anymore and they stop paying attention to you.
So from a logistical standpoint and just what you're actually doing behind the microphone in the studio, I would imagine it might be different from a collegiate level to where you are now, given the level of personnel involved. But can you just walk us through what like a morning broadcast is like in terms of, obviously you're reporting, but if anyone's ever watched a video of a broadcaster in the studio, you're working a mixing board and you're doing some things behind the scenes that we can't see if we're just listening. So what's that like for you in the morning?
Yeah, when I get there, and I get there a little after 4, I always have to tell people my alarm clock goes off at 2:45 in the morning. So when you're hitting REM sleep, my alarm is going off. And I get ready and get in the car and get there a little bit after 4. And then I start writing the first half hour of news. There's an editor, there's an assistant producer, others who've already been there even before I get there, getting things ready so that we know what sort of news we're going to be putting on the air at 5. And I begin writing the first half an hour of news. So that's my main focus when I get there. Once that's done and I'm on the air at 5 o'clock, that's when the whole team that's out in the newsroom really takes over. More writers come in. We have a managing editor who's like an overseer who comes in. And they're the ones that are talking to the reporters out in the field, because we have reporters who are live and working at that time of the morning. They're the ones who are taking in news feeds from all around the world. And they package it all together so that we know what's going on the air and when it's going on the air. And my job, once 5 o'clock hits and I go on the air, is to take all of their information that they have put into this rundown so they know when it's supposed to play, get all that information on the air in these tight news windows that we have, along with making sure that we hit the traffic on time and the weather on time and the sports on time and the business on time and all the other features. We have a quiz question a couple of times a day. Got to make sure that all of that is in there. My job is to, in that sense, be the quarterback who makes sure that all of those plays happen when they're supposed to play. In the studio, I always have to think about how many monitors I have. I've started to wear blue light glasses because of all of the monitors that I have to look at throughout the morning. I have 3 TVs. I have an internet monitor that has a bunch of different stock numbers and temperatures and all that kind of stuff on it. I have my news computer. I have a commercial computer. I have a weather computer. I have a computer that's connected to the mixing board that I'm operating throughout the newscast. There really does, when I think about it, there really is a lot going on. Once you get used to it, it's your job. You just sort of get used to it. But when I sit back and look about it, think about it, there's really a lot going on, a lot that you have to look at when you're in there.
I think that's the amazing thing. I've had the opportunity a few times as a musician over the years to sit in studio with DJs, either talking about music or playing a song or whatever. And it's amazing to watch. And I think the average person probably has no idea how many technical things you're actually doing. I've seen DJs and broadcasters, putting together clips on the fly as we spoke, and then playing them back after the next commercial break or whatever. And it's amazing that that's happening live, which is, again, very different from the world of podcasting or even, other recorded media, but the fact that you're live on the air. And I think the thing that always amazed me about WBBM specifically, and you pointed it out, was the timing of everything. Traffic and weather on the 8s. I remember just as a kid thinking, how do they do that?
Well, I'm horrible at math and I hate math. And I can't tell you how many times a day I say, if I knew there was math in this, I think I might have gone through a different field. I mean, this is crazy because you're constantly back timing in your head. I have to do this at this time so that I can execute this at this time. I need to hit the traffic and weather together on the 8s. I need to be able to hit the news sounders at the top and bottom of the hour so we can connect with CBS News. I need to get to the business at 23 and 53 and the sports at 16 and 46. And it's just all of these elements, they all have to be hit at just the right time. And so I am constantly doing math backward, I guess, counting backward in order to make sure that I do that while reading the news and making sure that everything sounds like I'm in total control, even though it's controlled chaos and people have no idea. It is a challenge, which is fun. It keeps me awake in there in the early morning hours. It's fun and it's crazy.
So I just want to backtrack a little bit and talk about kind of the early part of your career. So if I have my research right, you started your post-collegiate career at WMAQ 670, right?
Yeah, I got an internship there back when they did internships. I got an internship there, and I was planning on going to school for a master's degree at the University of Illinois in Springfield. They have a really, really excellent one-year master's degree program in reporting. And so I was planning on that. And as I neared the end of my internship, WMAQ was looking for an entry-level reporter. And we got to talking, and the bosses started talking, and they agreed to take a chance on me and give me a job. And at the time I was thrilled. I mean, I was working in Chicago. I could still live with my parents. And so I could afford to actually live. And I got a great, great first job. And from there, I bounced around to a bunch of different radio stations in town over the many years now, the more than 20 years now, which seems so weird to say. But I started there, and it was just a great experience of being with quality broadcasters who cared about the news, who cared about the audience. And that's where I learned, and I've seen this throughout Chicago radio now in all these years. The people that you hear on the radio, they're genuinely kind people, at least on the news side. They help each other. They're looking out for each other. They're competitive, yeah, but they're not mean. They're not sabotaging. Nothing like that. They really see it as a brotherhood, a sisterhood where, hey, we're in this together trying to do a good job. And I was glad that I was able to see that early on, and that is really carried throughout the career.
So at WMAQ, when you started, a lot of our audience might not know that was originally a traditional news station, and it was right on the cusp of transitioning into what we now know as the Score. So I understand that was instrumental in you transitioning to a different station. What was that like? Were you starting to hear the rumblings of, hey, we're going to be making a change to the format, or what was that like?
That was very weird because you get this job right out of college. You're all thrilled. Here you are. You're on the radio. You're doing the news. This is really fantastic. And then people start saying, well, they're going to make this the Score and fire us all. You know that, right? I mean, it's like none of us is going to be kept. Like they're all going to fire us all. I'm looking around like, what are you talking about? Like, I just got here. What are you talking about? And so I left in March of 2000, and in August of 2000, they flipped the switch and the Score moved over to 670. And not all of the people got fired, but a lot of people got fired. Some of the people got kept, and they're still on WBBM. They transferred over to a different news station. But a lot of people got let go, which was this. I was grateful that I got out and got another job and I could pay my bills, but it was a weird sort of rude awakening to the business. And it's not just radio, it's any business. One day you're there and thriving, and the next day they say, hey, we're going in another direction, and you're gone. And it's just really, really weird to see, but I'm glad I saw it early instead of later.
I think the one thing that's interesting, I've noticed maybe the difference between sports radio and news radio seems to be quite a bit more turnover in the sports radio side. I think because it's so entertainment based, in terms of how the form, and it is very long form, just kind of talking about things. It's not, not as rigid perhaps as news radio, but in news radio, there's some really long times, particularly in Chicago, long time broadcasters and some big personalities. One of the one I wanted to ask you about was Big John Howe. You worked with him at WIND. What was that like working with him?
Working with John was a dream. And I mean that. I'm not just saying this because this is going to be on the internet and John's going to be able to watch it. I really do mean this. I was a big country music fan and still am. And so I listened to Big John for years on US 99. And then when everything worked out and they paired the two of us together at WIND, I never thought I'd get to meet this guy, much less work with this guy. And the thing I loved about John when I was working with him and still love about him today is he's the real deal. He's not only a great broadcaster, he's a really, really skilled broadcaster, but he's just a kind man. And so to be able to be behind the scenes, meet this guy that I had listened to for many years, work with him on the radio, and then find out, wow, he's really a great guy. He really is very, very just kind and generous and really, really good. It was nice because there are several people in radio I've met like that were big stars that I was afraid to meet. And I met them and found out, oh, they're actually wonderful people. And so it's nice to have that happen. I've had a lot of really great experiences in radio, and I would say for sure one of the highlights was working with John, because he's just such a great guy. Every once in a while we talk about putting the band back together, but I think that ship has probably sailed for both of us. We're both doing okay, but it was just really, really fun.
So then, following your time at IND is when you went on to join WBBM, right, in 2014. And I know you were the midday news reporter and the host of that time slot. But then just earlier this year is when you moved into the morning drive time and filled another pair of big shoes, and that's Pat Cassidy. After a 22-year run with WBBM, 51 years in Chicago, broadcasting. What was that like, stepping into that role?
Yeah, Pat is another guy, sort of like John Howell, who is so kind, so generous, so gracious, always there to help, especially younger broadcasters. And with Pat, it was sort of full circle, because when I started at WMAQ, Pat was the morning show host there. And so I got to meet him and get to work with him. And then I leave and he moves over to WBBM. And then all these years later, almost 20 years later, I come to WBBM and I begin working with him again. And when I got to WBBM, never crossed my mind I may someday replace Pat Cassidy. Just not even on my radar. I was just happy to be there. I was happy to work with a great team and be a part of what really feels like is something special. And then fast forward, what has it been, 8 years or so, and it got to the time where Pat has grandkids. He's got other things that he wants to do. And he says, I've been doing this a long time. I think I'm going to go and enjoy some of those other experiences while I can. And he announced that he was leaving. And when that happens, in your heart, you kind of hope, hey, maybe they'll consider me. Maybe I could be the guy. But then when it happens, you can't believe it. I mean, you have to be, in radio like anything else, there has to be humility and just a sense of reality here. You're talking on the radio. It's a great gig, but someday you're going to be gone and someone's going to replace you and the world is going to keep spinning. So I keep it all in perspective. I'm going to be gone someday and somehow everything will still be okay. So keep it in perspective. And yet there's still something wonderful about being able to have the experience of being in that spot in this radio station and the confidence that the boss is showing you when they let you do something like that. It's only been about 6 months or so, but it's already been really cool.
So, go back 25 years and even more than that, a young Cisco, and there's a young person out there right now who's, listening and hopefully, 20 years from now says, wow, I've been listening to Cisco Cotto every morning, on the radio, and gosh, I love his voice and whatever. And what's your advice? Is there a similar path to the way you came up? Is it different now? And what's the way that somebody who wants to get into broadcasting can go about it today?
Something that everyone asks for right away, and it's not just in radio, it's in a lot of places, but it is in radio and TV, is what sort of a platform do you have? This is not even on the radar when I got started. How many Twitter followers do you have? How many followers on Instagram? Maybe even how many Facebook friends you have? Well, that seems like less of a deal now. What's going on with you in TikTok? Do you have some sort of a following there? They understand that digital is not just the future, it is the here and now. And they don't necessarily want to build you into a brand. They want you to already have some kind of a network, some sort of following. And so in some respects, that's a much more difficult challenge, because you need to be a good broadcaster. You need to be good at the job, gathering news and understanding what's news and what's not news, and how do you present it in a compelling way, how to be a good storyteller. You have to know all of that, but you also have to work this social media presence that gives you another avenue, or even avenues, to be able to take what you're doing on the radio, or in a lot of senses TV too, to be able to take that material and give it a wider audience. So you have to be both. You're digital and you're also audio or video in the medium. I would say that's a totally different thing than I had to do when I was coming up in the business. Be focused on that. The other thing is just be willing to work hard and stick it out and get your reps. We live in a culture that is go, go, go. I want what I want. I want it now. I'm just moving forward. And it's not necessarily going to work that way in the broadcasting business. You may have to stick with it in a position or in a market or at a station that you don't necessarily want to be for a long time. You may have to be there for a while, and that's okay. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, and you're going to become even better so that when you get whatever that final job is that you want, you're better equipped to do it well and to really nail it instead of botching it and ending up losing that opportunity.
It's interesting that you bring up kind of having a platform to begin with. That's really something that happened in the music industry as well. So it used to be a very traditional format, where you would go move to a city and try to gain the attention of somebody in New York or of LA or Nashville, and then work your way into a traditional record deal as an artist. You'd be maybe playing in a bar somewhere and somebody would notice you and that sort of thing. And it's the same thing now with the advent of the internet, particularly in the early 2000s, MySpace, and of course, YouTube. Bands and artists had to grow their own following to be able to go to the stations and say, look at what we've already created. We're a safe bet, which is kind of what you're getting at. Someone's already has a proven track record, and it's really the new reel, right? I mean, before, you might create an audio reel, even just out of the college station, or even if you had home equipment. But now you're sort of proving yourself right in front of the world to then try to get to that next level. So it's
promotion money. Where they, I don't want to sound cynical or whatever, but it's a business. And so whether it's radio or music or publishing as well, they don't want to have to put a lot of money into making you somebody or making your book sell or your album or whatever reporting that you're doing. They don't have the money for it. Budgets are tight. And so if you come and you say, hey, I have 20,000 followers here or 50,000 followers, whatever it is, then it's way more likely that they're going to put you on the radio, they're going to play your music, they're going to sell your book, and so they're willing to take a chance on you. But unless you're buying lists of followers, which I'm told is frowned upon these days, unless you're doing that, not everyone has the either comedic ability or artistic ability to be able to get that sort of a level of following. But that's a big challenge. A lot of people are doing it and doing it well, but it's a big challenge.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have kind of started as, what we would call YouTubers, or even local podcasters or whatever, and then they grew to attain a national platform, or they've, gone on from having, think of like Pat McAfee, as an athlete, and then goes on to have a YouTube show, and now has a job with the World Wrestling Entertainment. And so once you sort of have a platform, you can grow and get into these other areas.
Yeah, I did see it too. Yeah, that's what Artie Sakara she was an intern of mine when I was at WLS Radio. And she started a YouTube cooking show with her husband, and the Food Network took notice. And now she's a Food Network star.
Right.
And it all, she went from intern to YouTube. Hey, I'm making some meals with my husband to now she's a big star and she's fantastic. And YouTube really was the conduit that made that happen.
All right. So it kind of launches me into my next sort of maybe fun question. You were getting into other different areas of media. I read online, and I hope that's right, that you were featured on Chicago Fire and PD in a minor role. Is that correct?
It's crazy. It's so funny that many years ago, a guy who knew that I was in radio, I was getting some photos taken, and they said, "Oh, you're in radio. You have a voice here." That I know this agent, and she does voiceovers, and she books people for voiceovers. Why don't you call her? And so I called her, and this woman picks up the phone, and I'm just going to be honest, she sounded like a little squatty trucker, cigarette hanging out of her mouth. She picks up the phone, she's like, "Hello," and I was a little taken aback. And I said, "Oh, this guy gave me your information, says that you book people for voiceovers." And goes, "I don't know what he's talking about. I don't do voiceovers." And then she said, I'll never forget, she goes, "Are you pretty?" What are you talking about? And I said, I don't know. And she goes, well, send me a picture. And so I sent her a picture, and she calls me and goes, yeah, I'll get you some work. So she booked me in all of these print modeling jobs for the post office and Sears and Home Depot and all these things. I'm in a thing for Sears where I'm holding holding an air conditioner, and so I know it's a microwave, holding a microwave and smiling, here I am. And then that morphed into casting in these shows. As more and more shows started being filmed here in Chicago, she said, hey, maybe I think I can get you some roles here. And so far, I have only had roles as a reporter. And
typecast, man, typecast.
That's what I told my wife. Honey, I'm typecast. I can do so much more, so much more. I have skills. And yet, for some reason, I'm typecast. But there's just nothing cooler than going to Chicago PD or Chicago Fire or some of these other shows. You sit in your own trailer. You go in the makeup chair, and there's these celebrities around you, and you go on the set, and it's all the lights, camera, action, Hollywood stuff. And at the end of the day, you go home and you go, that was a pretty good day. I think I could do some more of that. That's a pretty good way to earn a little money and have some fun. And so I've done that a few times, and I still can't believe it, but it's been pretty fun.
And you broke the mold. You broke the stereotype. You don't just have a face for radio. So there you go.
Well, apparently, right? although it's pretty heavy makeup. I'm going to be honest.
So, all right, we talked a lot about your broadcasting career, but there's that's not the only thing you've done in your career. At this same time that you've been working your way into different roles and into where you're at now, you have had a career in ministry. So how did that grow out? Where did that come from?
Just felt this, I don't know, desire, calling, whatever you want to call it, to go to Moody Theological Seminary downtown. And wasn't married, was still living at home, was on the radio, and just felt, man, I want to know the Bible better as a Christian, and figure, the Bible's a pretty big deal. Maybe I should learn this a little better. And so I started going to Moody Seminary and met my wife there, and we got married and moved to Oak Park, and I finished my degree. And at that point, I just started feeling like this burden, again, I say calling, man, we need to do something in this community. Something needs to be done. I want to be able to tell people about Jesus. And so we got a church started. It was my wife and me and several other couples and their kids, and people started coming along for the adventure. And we got a church started in Oak Park called Village Church of Oak Park. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience of seeing something brand new get started and take root in the community. We saw lives transformed. We saw people who had relationships that were damaged, and they were healed, and they were growing personally. Just so amazing. And it was painful when we moved back out to Aurora back in 2019 just to be by my family. We never saw my family anymore, and we wanted to see them. And it was so difficult to leave that church family, not only knowing that we were a part of starting it, but just because we loved it so much and we were having so much fun there. But we did leave, and it was painful, but we're glad we did. We do see my family all the time in Aurora now, but it was just really, really tough to leave that church.
I think what people don't understand is, even if you're not necessarily a religious person, a Christian, the impact that a local congregation, can have on a community, just bringing people together. And I've listened to a lot of, again, not necessarily even religious philosophers talk about that's one of the things that our country is having a hard time with right now, particularly following the pandemic. We were separated from one another in our communities, and even regular religious attendance at church or synagogues or mosques is not back to where it was pre-pandemic. And so I think that's something that, for us to kind of heal as a nation, again, even if you're just going just to be connected with people, it's so valuable.
Yeah, you really do need the community. And that's when I moved out here 2019, it was right before the pandemic hit. And I very quickly got connected with a great church, Village Bible Church. Loved the leaders and the people. And my wife and I said, hey, this is where we want to be connected. And I ended up going on staff at Village Bible Church. And so I was on staff during the pandemic when everything hit and no one really knew what was going on or what to do. And one of the things the leaders at Village Bible Church kept saying is, we want people to be safe. We want them to feel safe. And yet we also know we need to get together. We need to be with each other. We need community. We can't have this sort of isolation go on and on and on and on. And so I was proud of the way our leaders navigated through that, because, man, was it difficult, while also saying just up front and throughout, we need each other. We can't just say we're going to spend a year or two separated. We need to be around each other. And so that took innovation, creativity. We started having events outside, doing church services outside, and people just loved it. We thought, is anyone going to come? And people came, and they loved it. And people from nearby communities came and loved it. And so that's when we started to see, yeah, we are feeling this outright. We were made for each other. We were made for community. But so tough when none of us has lived through a pandemic. So how do we respond to this? But yeah, I'm tracking with you there. It's one of the things that's so true. We do need each other.
Yeah, it's amazing how churches, businesses, all sorts of community organizations had to make that shift. And I know video was a big part of it. I don't know if Village did that at any of your campuses. Did you guys have like a streaming service for any of your campuses?
What we started doing is when the pandemic hit was creating a streaming service for all of our campuses. And we had each Village Bible Church location has a campus pastor. That campus pastor ordinarily does the preaching on Sunday mornings instead of having a video sermon. And when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, we knew we needed to do something, but we needed to keep everyone in these various campuses connected, while also having, we don't want to do 6 or 7 different broadcasts and put that together. And so we created one webcast of a service. We included all of our campus pastors in that in some way. Someone's making an announcement, someone's praying, someone's preaching, someone's just saying hello to people, so that we could keep everyone connected while also putting out that product. That ended up being, thank God for it, it ended up being really, really important at creating another connecting point for people. So they felt like, I can't go to my church, but through this video, seeing the pastors, seeing the other staff members, seeing the team leading the music, I still feel like I have that connection. Just vital during that time. And we're wrestling like all churches through, how long do you keep with the video? How long do you keep putting together the online service? Because we need to be in person. We need each other in that way. And yet you have to deal with the fact that there are people who are homebound and can't get there for a service, and you want them to be able to have a service to watch. So a lot of churches are post-pandemic, if we can call it that. They're wrestling through with what to do with the video service now.
Yeah, I think that's every church is going through that. I've seen it at ours, and our church. I attend Yellow Box here in Naperville, and they put together a really, really well, high-produced video service. And I think in just talking to some of the folks there, it's tough, because when you put together something that's that well executed, sometimes it makes some people just say, well, I'll just watch that, and you can't deny the ability to reach people, in, like you said, folks who are homebound, folks who are in different locations. And it's like businesses. There are benefits to remote work. There are benefits to different, remote connection, but then you do lose the synergy and the feeling of that in person. So yeah, you're right. It'll be interesting to see as we continue to climb out of this, where that goes next.
Yeah, I'm hopeful some people are seeing it now that we're a couple of years into this. I'm hopeful that some people are saying, there's just something different. It's not quite the same. The video is nice. It's on demand. And aren't we an on-demand society? I want it my way when I want it and all that. But I think people are seeing there's just nothing like being in the room with people. The video, even if it's really good, the video it can't replicate that. It was never designed to. It can't do it.
That's right. That's right. So what's next for you? Are you going to enjoy some more time this summer with the family? Do you have any upcoming projects, anything different, anything going on with church?
Yeah, I told you earlier, I got connected with Village Bible Church. We are getting a new campus of Village Bible Church started in Naperville. We've been at it for about a year now. Wonderful church, Grace for Life Bible Church. which is right across from the Naperville police station there at the corner of River and Aurora Avenue. They were struggling. They came to us and said, hey, we want to give you the building, and we want you just to get a new church started here. And that was right about the same time that we were coming out of the pandemic and figuring out, what goes next? How are we going to do this? What's the new norm? And so Village Bible Church agreed to take over the church and get a new campus started. And so we're engaged in that process now. It is exciting. It is scary. It is busy. It is unpredictable. But what we have loved is that we have a group of people who are there committed to get a new thing started and excited about it and just trusting that it's going to be very good, and they're hopeful. And so that is consuming a lot of my time and my wife's time, as she's my partner in this, to just say, okay, what does it look like to get a new church started in a community like Naperville, where no one would say, Naperville doesn't really have enough churches. Could we possibly get a few more churches here?
Right.
I know no one is ever going to say that. And so what is it that we're going to do that is going to provide an alternative or be different? And the only thing that we've come up with, just like the church that we started in Oak Park, I don't have some big grand vision. I don't have something totally unique like a new business plan or something. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to tell people about Jesus and just sort of see what happens. And so far, it's been great, and we really are excited about what's to come. But it is an adventure that I never ever thought I would be on, and yet I am, and it's really, really great. My family and I are having a blast.
Cisco, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your journey about being a messenger in more ways than one. And we're just excited to see what's next for you and your church and your career and with your family. We wish you nothing but the best of luck. And thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Thank you.